Hello and welcome. I'm Shannon Eastman, and this is the Inside Growth Podcast. These are conversations that take a look at the inside you kind of growth that yields more flow and less force. And who doesn't want more of that? I am delighted to be joined today by Breda McCague. She's a senior professional in the banking industry. She is a coach, an advocate for women in the workplace, diversity and inclusion, and unconscious bias. She has started her own journey about 7.5 years ago, and she joins us today to talk about where she was, why she made the change or opted to look for a change that became this head and heart integration for her, and what her life is like today because of it. It's a wonderful story, and she's got lots of energy and passion about the subject matter. And I like how she described it towards the end. The pain that she went through wasn't for nothing. She's using it now to teach and share and inspire other people on how to dance with their pain in ways that are less suffocating. It's my intention that this conversation makes you brave for 3 minutes and honestly and authentically look at your situation. It's May 9th, May 10th in 2021. We're about 14 months into COVID, and it's been tough. It's been really tough. So 3 minutes of being really brave and honest about where you are right now, and if the strategies that you've been using to navigate your life up until this moment are the strategies you want to continue to use for the next 10 years. Or maybe you want to make some space and consider other strategies that might want to come in now and support you as you navigate the next however rest of your journey. I am excited. Breda is full of energy and passion, and she's a lot to say. Her story, I hope it touches you and inspires you. And the rest of the information on Breda and what she's up to can be found online, Breda McCague. I'm sure if you Google her, you'll find it. But it's also on InsideGrowthMinicon.com. So thank you, Breda, for joining us today. Welcome to the Inside Growth Podcast. Tell us a little bit about yourself before we jump into your 3-foot journey story.
Thank you, Shannon. Delighted to be on today. Delighted to get sharing my story as well. I do believe in storytelling and believe that others can learn a lot when we're just truthful and honest and open about our own stories.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
a bit about me. I'm Breda McCague. I'm from Monaghan. I am 44. I work in global transformation in banks. I am a motivational speaker. I'm a mom to 3 boys from 14 to 7. I play in a rock band, I play in a trad band, and I spent 20 years in the Reserve Defence Forces and was my unit's first female lieutenant.
Wow, I didn't know the last bit about you.
Yeah. Yeah. Give me a mortar, give me a grenade, and I'm good.
Wow, that is so cool. And I was going to say, tell me about what you're up to these days with Lean In and Women in Conversation. But now I'm like, which way do we want to go with this? But let's go with the Women in Conversation.
Yeah.
Where did that come from, and what are you doing with that right now?
Yeah. Massive passion for diversity and inclusion. And the reason that came about is because of the army days, because I was the first of 5 women allowed into the Reserve Defence Forces in 1993. And I seen the damage and the unconscious bias at work, exclusion and inclusion. And I got really interested in all of that. And then what happened was in banking, I seen a lot of exclusion and minority groups as well. And I ended up leading some of the female-led networks in some of the banks that I worked in. Then I decided that I needed to learn a bit more about Lean In because I had seen it on social media, because I love social media. And I wanted to build out some kind of a structure for women who would like to mentor women. Because I'd seen women mentoring women, and I thought, wow, this is so powerful. And I hadn't seen that because most of my mentors were men from the army days. So I founded Lean In Ireland with a fabulous woman from Belfast who had set it up in Belfast, Nuala Murphy. And then we built that out. And then since that, I've ended up doing talks around inclusion, exclusion, and unconscious bias. And I'm trying to teach corporates and teams and everybody how to recognize their own biases, how to recognize their old, out of date blueprint thinking programs, and how to revamp those, reset those, reprogram those so they serve them better in life.
Wow.
And then I met some other amazing women, and we're about to kick off a fabulous movement called Women in Conversation across Ireland, because I don't think women have had a voice over the last year or so, particularly in COVID with all of the restrictions and so forth. So I'm at a lot of things that I am passionate about.
One of the things that struck me about Women in Conversation, is there a link or a place someone can go right now if they wanted to know more about that and what you're up to? Maybe your LinkedIn profile?
Not yet. We're just actually trying to pull it together at the moment. So watch this space. You'll see lots of it in the media towards the end of the year, but we haven't released anything yet because we're still forming, putting some of the bricks in place into the foundation.
It was a desire that came about from your own personal experience of witnessing how many professional women have had a really painful and difficult time of it this last year, but not necessarily felt like they could open up about it or confide or share or speak publicly about it in the workplace. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
So that, plus I do think that we've had a void. I don't see women's voices, across our government spokespeople, HSC. I see women in the background, all right, doing the work. So I see them on front line. I see them all homeschooling. And I'm not saying guys don't do it as well. But what I am saying is I've seen and heard from a lot of men over the last year around COVID and restrictions, and decisions are being made that women are then expected to implement on the ground. And that's causing them a lot of pain. A lot of women trying to work really difficult, stressful jobs, managing 3 kids in homeschooling as well, without very, very much support. So I think there has been a void there of the female voice, female opinions, and female decision making has not been visible. And I want to see what we can do to change that.
We connected a few times over the last few months. Actually, it's been the last 2 years. I beg your pardon. But more recently, we've been talking about the head and heart and the being able to connect them. And we use language like, we cut ourselves off from the neck down, and everything needs to be very logical and very critical in how we think and approach things. But that there's this different space that opens up when you move 3 feet from head to heart, and you allow both parts of you to show up, particularly in your workspace. I've invited you on the show today, Breda, because your story has touched me, and I wanted to share it with someone listening today who probably needs to hear it. The 3-foot journey is just a label we give to the 3 feet moving head into your heart. Can you tell me what was going on in your life way back when, where you went, right, something's got to change, and you found out that it was this head-heart connection that was right for you? Tell me a little bit about where you were and what was going on.
Yeah, so I would describe it as a T-junction, because I think that is ideally the way a lot of people's lives end up going. So I found myself at a T-junction in life due to a toxic relationship. So it was pain through a toxic relationship that forced me into that T-junction to try and figure out which way to turn. So I often, I work with a lot of people across all different industries and all walks of life around emotional intelligence coaching. And I find a lot of them end up at a T-junction of some sort, where you've got a major decision to make, and it's one way or the other. And for me, my decision at that time was, I need to figure out how this has happened to me. And I'm a project manager by trade, so I always need to figure out how that happened so I can get the right solution.
Yeah.
I decided at that point, I have stuff to learn here. I'm missing a whole chunk of education about gender stereotyping, the difference in guys and girls. And I know a lot of that from mentoring a lot of people and being mentored myself. So I guess I wanted to dig into it a bit more to get down to how did I end up in a relationship like this, and how has this ended up happening like it did, to understand. And that's where I started learning about conditioning and the importance of conditioning in our lives, And the very first piece of material I listened to was Tony Robbins. And I'm sure all of your listeners will know Tony Robbins. But I actually was driving on a motorway when I heard him first speak. And it was that desperation Junction moment of, where am I going to go to find information? And I thought, well, I have a phone. I'll have a Google here. And I went to YouTube. I put in positive, something about positive. I didn't even know who I was looking for at the time. And found Tony Robbins. And as he spoke, the tears ran down my face, because it was like a million pennies dropping on me right there. Wow. And it was as if somebody had just opened this big box of information that I had not come across before. And you know what? That information has absolutely transformed my life. It is totally different now. I would say the way I describe it best is, I was living unconsciously up until then. I was a product of my environment. I was conditioned perfectly by society, and it had not worked for me. And what happened there at that Junction, when I started to educate myself on conscious living, understanding how my mind works, understanding how my emotions worked, and understanding the massive piece my conditioning has had in who I am as an adult, how I think, how I see the world, how I believe about myself, all of that was conditioned. And when I started learning about that, that's where I started to feel a bit back in the driving seat again, because then I could change that. Yeah. And that is what I've done, Shannon, since, and that was about 7.5 years ago. So I've been learning since, and now I teach others, which is amazing. Wow. So it feels like that pain wasn't a waste. You know, I'm putting it to good use.
Wow, you definitely are. You're doing some extraordinary projects, and I love seeing you show up in my feed. You've answered all my questions, even though I didn't have to ask them, but I did share the questions with you before we started. But I just wanted to pull out for any listener right now who needs to hear this story. You know, Breda, tell me one insight that supported you, that you kind of clung to the most, particularly over the I'd say 7 years, but probably going into those 7 years for the first couple of years. What was the advice, be it Tony or someone else, that really resonated with you as you began this new discovery, new education?
I would say, and I've seen this somewhere across my social media channels, because my social media channels are full of quotes. They're full of people like me that are sharing their story and are really talking openly. And I think you can learn a lot faster from there. So I'd ask your listeners to think about what's in their feed, because if mine is teaching me on a daily basis, why isn't yours? You know,
such a good point. I have a mate in the tech space, artificial intelligence, and he absolutely abhors Facebook. And I remember I never mentioned anything until he asked me one day, just out of sheer frustration, what are you doing on Facebook? And I was like, I have set up Facebook to be my news feed, my source of intel and inspiration and challenge and thought provoking. Like, I don't have people sharing food with me on their feed. I have, you know, professors and academics and subject matter experts who, you know, do quite similar to you, Breda, and, you know, they share a story and they challenge you and they make me think differently. So I've definitely been diligent in keeping my feed clean and organizing it to make sure I'm getting content that serves me. Tony says something about the 5 people that you surround yourself with the most is the destination where you'll find yourself in about 5 or 10 years. I'm paraphrasing, but that also applies to social.
Big time. And that is a really key one, because do you know what? To be fair, when I started my journey, I had no other channels to turn to, because any conversations I had with people at the time, they were people that weren't prepared for those conversations. And they said things that actually put me back instead of helping me to deal with what I was experiencing. And that's why I turned to social media, because I could do that on my phone. And everyone listening to this today can learn from their phone. Everyone's opening it and we're having a little flick regularly, so many times a day. I want people learning every time they open their phone, because not only does learning help you in the long term, but you get a bit of inspiration, and who doesn't need more energy?
Yeah.
You know?
So true. Looking back 7.5 years ago on that motorway, if you could pop into that car with Breda and just give her one bit of advice that she takes with her on those 7 years, what would you have said to her?
I would say, and it's back to your question with the insights, we don't know what we don't know. And that is a massive statement, because so many people have no idea around self-mastery, life mastery, mind mastery, emotional intelligence. And you know why? Because that is not taught in mainstream education. And I find people that then trip over something emotionally in their life and end up with me learning about their emotional intelligence and about self-mastery, mind mastery, and life mastery. But it's just a shame, Shannon, because if we taught people this stuff when they're younger, then we wouldn't have such a dysfunctional society. But it would seem that we don't want to teach them in mainstream. So I'm going to do what I can, and so are you, to try and put our education out there and all of these insights that we've had to learn the hard way, put that out there into society and see how many people we can help to open minds with. And I think that's a big one. The open mind is the bit. I've worked with so many people. Some of them have such closed minds that I can't actually help them. And I can see how I could help them, but they won't even let me, because it's so not mainstream and it's so stigmatized to talk about your emotions. Yet men and women have been built with a full set of emotions each. And you've been sent out into the world. No one has taught you how to use them. And then you get dysfunction, and then you get hurt, you get turmoil, you get emotional pain. And so many therapists and so many people are trying alternative remedies to heal themselves. And I'm thinking, if we could just prevent this a little bit more, that would be a lot smarter as a society.
The AI chat friend of mine, we were having a conversation the last 3 months. I can't recall exactly when. And he just turned to me and he said, you know, the head and heart's a really important conversation. He said, it was only last year, he's 48 years old. It was only last year that I started listening to my heart. And it was such an extraordinary statement. And I said, why? He's like, I just never thought it was right before. And I was like, so there was a part of you that you labeled wrong.
Yeah.
You didn't realize why you'd labeled it wrong, but you did. And for 47 and a half years, you just was like, nope, not interested. And he's like, well, yeah, because the head is where logic is, where reason is, and isn't that where everyone wants to be? And I was like, wow, we have so much to learn.
Much to teach people as well. And to your point there, I think people see the logical mind and the conscious mind as what should drive them. But if you don't understand what's in your subconscious mind and what your long-term emotional memory is, then your decision making is not going to serve you right. So, I mean, there is so much we can prevent. Life is short, right? I'm 44 at the moment. Life is short. And I'm thinking, if we can teach people this faster, quicker, and make it more mainstream discussion, that people can learn from this without worrying about what people will think. Then imagine the amount of lives we can improve.
Agreed. Completely agreed. We're at time, but I do want to touch base just briefly on fear. There's a lot of fear going into this space. Fear because, oh, if I think about that, it's going to hurt, but also fear about what other people think about me. How do you play and dance with fear, Breda, in your day-to-day?
Fear is something I could talk about for a week, Shannon.
Yeah, I know. You and me both are like, go.
I've had to study it, because until I understood how much fear was behind my own decision making, then I was still going to be stuck. So I got really into studying fears and spotting fear in my thinking. And that is a really tricky one to do, but a very important one to do. So until you start to become aware of how you think and what thoughts are running through your mind, like scientists at the moment reckon there's 6,000 thoughts. Every one of us are having 6,000 thoughts a day. So do you all know what they are? And most of that is coming from your subconscious mind. Now, your subconscious mind is the one that was programmed and conditioned that we talked about earlier back when you were a kid.
0 to 6 years old.
What's in there, then that's what's actually driving your decision making. And that can't be sensible. So for me, learn what your fears are. Start to spot them popping up in the decision making you're doing. It's the smallest of things. It's no, I'm not doing that because what would people think? It's I'm not going for that job because there's no way that I would get it right. So I find fear of change, fear of rejection, fear of failure, and fear of success are the biggest ones that I find across. And I see it in patterns constantly across everybody that I talk to or coach or have conversations with. It's massive. It's so out there. And it's something that, yes, we used when we were primitive people, but that's millions of years ago. And all I can see at the moment is fear is keeping people stuck.
Yeah.
So
Final 2 cents on the fear subject. What really shifted for me 2 years ago, I had this very big aha moment. Number one, your unconscious programming that is running your life, that we are mostly oblivious to, was stored through your experiences from 0 to 6 years old.
yeah.
It's dealing with theta and delta waves and the way we were, our minds worked as little ones. So whatever you experience from 0 to 6 is like the bulk of your unconscious. And then the rest came through repetition.
Yeah.
So you heard things over and over again while you were growing up, that's then stored. And so you become this adult and you navigate life today thinking that you're applying what you learned at university. You're not. You're not at all. You're running these unconscious programs and not aware that they're there. And then 2 years ago, it was the second half of that coin that consuming knowledge and information alone does not change who you are. You must embody it and experience it and feel it. I want to just mention special Denny Morales, who works for the CBS over in Las Vegas, their nighttime programming. He's doing some really extraordinary documentaries, which he's titled Feel to Heal. Feel number 2 Heal. Denny Morales, filmmaker, TV producer. But it's important, one, to recognize that fear it's there. You're not getting rid of it. It's not meant to be an obstacle to keep you out of what your heart wants. It's feedback to help you figure out what bits of your unconscious programming want resolution and resolve today. Breda, I want to have another 7 conversations with you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing your story. The 3-foot journey is over on InsideGrowthMiniCon.com. Minicon as in many conversations, many insights, many books. Breda, any final last words before we wrap up?
One mantra that I want everyone to learn is what other people think of you is none
of your business.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Other people's opinions of you are none of your business, and 99.9% of the time have nothing to do with you anyway. It's all projection, and not all, I don't want to speak in absolutes, but it is all tied to their own unconscious programming. I want to add to that mantra, if I may, and see if you agree. Other people's opinions of you are none of your business. Your response to their opinion is.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Your response to their opinion, what it makes you feel. Does it make you hide? Does it make you shrink? That's interesting feedback for you to go and examine in your unconscious self in order for it to resolve and clear and do what it needs to so that you can live this fulfilling life. I love that. I love that. Those are really great words to end on. Breda, thank you so much.
Pleasure being with you, Shannon.
Cheers, darling. God bless.
Bye.
I'm Shannon Eastman, and thank you for listening to the Inside Growth podcast, InsideGrowthMinicon.com. I have a feeling that your story wants sharing, the story of going from head to heart. Who were you when you found out that that was something you wanted to do? What did you learn along the way, and who are you today because of that journey? Details are available on the website. If you're feeling the prompt, if you know that's you and your time has come, then I would love to hear from you. InsideGrowthMinicon.com.